You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. We've been making cheese in Wisconsin since before we were even a state, which may be one reason why we win so many awards for it. It's what happens when a whole state dreams in cheese. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
This is Capri Cafaro, host of Eat Your Heartland Out. This week, we travel to the land of Lincoln to visit Scratch Brewing Company, where brewer and co-owner Marika Josephson gives us a taste of what inspires their unique brewing style. Then it's over to Springfield to meet Amy Beadle, marketing manager of the town's Convention and Visitors Bureau. She introduces us to the famed horseshoe sandwich that Springfield put on the map. That's all coming up next. Marika, thank you for joining Eat Your Heartland Out.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I was really taken by everything that I've learned about Scratch. And I want to know how you started from scratch brewing.
Well, I started as a home brewer, and so did my two other business partners who started Scratch with me. One of them left after the first couple years. So ever since then, it's just been me and Aaron. We started, brewing in our kitchen, basically. And I was brewing at a time when I was starting to get more sort of conscious and aware of food systems more generally. I was shopping at farmers markets. I wanted to know where all of the meat I was eating came from. And I was trying to source my food as locally as possible. Right. And when I started brewing, I just sort of without thinking, started bringing the same mindset to brewing. I wanted to be brewing with the things that I was finding in farmers markets, and I wanted my beer to sort of reflect my food ethos as well. When I met Aaron, we sort of gelled on that immediately because he had been experimenting with the ingredients that he had grown up with in the woods around where we ended up building Scratch in Southern Illinois. He really understood the foraged side of things in a way that I didn't, because this wasn't my native territory. I'm from Southern California originally, but I was experimenting with a lot of these farmed ingredients, and we sort of put that together and created Scratch.
Well, and I want to talk more extensively about those ingredients and how they are integrated into your final product, because there are some really interesting ones. You can really understand what you're talking about when it comes to not only sourcing local, but when you speak of the foraged aspect, there's some ingredients that are, at least I can see from some of the information that's available that you use in your beers that I have never seen in the context of a brewed drink. So I can't wait to talk to you a little bit more about that. But I want to just go back for a minute and ask, what made you start to home brew to begin with?
I grew up around beer. My dad was a home brewer. I remember the carboys in our garage when I was very young, the smell of the beer fermenting down there and all that. And he would, drag us into every brewery he could find back in the 80s in Southern California, which was, starting to become already at that part of the country a burgeoning scene. When I moved to Southern Illinois later in life, it was the craft beer hadn't quite hit here yet. And so I guess, being somebody who generally likes to just make things and use my hands, I thought like the only solution to me was, I guess I just need to make it. It doesn't exist here. So I started making a lot of the beers that I missed from all over the country or all over the world that I had been drinking and really loving before moving to Southern Illinois. So it gave me a good background into different beer styles. I became a certified beer judge. And I was judging beer competitions and stuff. And it gave me a good sort of critical window onto, understanding processes and flavor profiles.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and your uniqueness, your approach, and those flavor profiles have actually earned you all a number of awards and nominations, including a James Beard Award, I believe, nomination, and
Mm-hmm.
some nominations for your book too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Aaron and I both recognized early on that what we were doing was unique, and if we could, make sure that the quality was there
Mm-hmm.
with all of the beers that we were brewing, that we were fundamentally making good beer at the base of all of these different styles and different ways of playing around with plants, that we would have something successful. And so we've we I say this, and so does Aaron quite often. We never set out to make weird beer. We set out to make something that told a story, even though the ingredients were a little bit unusual. We set out to make good beer first and foremost.
Well, you have set me up for a great segue, which is dead leaves and carrots. And looking at some of the incredible concoctions that you all have developed, one of the things that struck me from a conversation we had previously, off air was, your trying to capture the terroir of Southern Illinois. We often hear terroir talked about in the context of wine, for example, and even to a certain extent, cider. We don't really hear a lot of it in beer, but then you talk about bringing some of these really interesting plants into the process, and you get a whole different type of product. And so, weird it may be, but apparently good. Tell me about dead leaves and carrots and what this is all about, because it is a beer that is currently, at least right now, on your menu.
Dead leaves and carrots. Well, that is a great place to start. That beer was inspired by the fall. I know it's not the fall right now, but it was inspired by basically jumping into a big pile of dead leaves in the fall, and that smell of that crispness, the smell of the fall. We wanted to infuse that into a beer, basically. And carrots were coming up at the garden at the same time. And so there's kind of like this nice spiciness from the carrot that complemented the crisp tannin layers of the leaves that has kind of become a little bit of a cult classic, I think, maybe at Scratch. And we are surrounded by trees. The brewery is surrounded 360 degrees with trees. And we're lucky in that sense, because they really inspire us, and we can use them, every single day that we brew in completely different ways. We started out by using the leaves. That seems sort of like the most natural way of using them. But after maybe a year or two, realized, well, the bark has a lot of flavor components too, and the bark can be very different from the leaves, or the sap when it's running in many different trees, not just maple trees. Has another flavor component entirely. And so we did a series called Single Tree, where we tried to extract the most flavor components that we could from a single tree, and infuse them into the beer, to really kind of express what it is that, you sort of taste and smell in a birch tree or maple tree, right, or a sassafras tree, for instance. Right now in Southern Illinois, our woods are absolutely teeming with life. It just feels like a rainforest, especially now. It's raining today, and it's just so green and lush. We're excited because probably in a couple of days, we're going to have chanterelle mushrooms, and we're going to collect them to make the chanterelle bière de garde, which is one of our I would say we don't have any flagship beers here. There's nothing we make year round, nothing that you can buy all the time. But if we had a flagship beer, it might be the Chanterelle Bière de Garde. It was the very first beer that we bottled. We try to make it every year when we can. And it really expresses to us something that's very unique about walking through the woods in the middle of the summer after a rainfall like the one we've had today. It's just really... The earth gets so damp, it kind of gets a little mushroomy. That's when the chanterelles pop up. If you're walking through a big patch of them, you kind of start to get this apricot aroma lifting up from the ground. And if you pick them, it gets all over your fingers, and in a basket, you just have this incredible aroma surrounding you of sort of buttery apricot earthiness. And that's what we really tried to accomplish in that beer. And, for us, I think it's most emblematic of kind of conveying the terroir of Southern Illinois.
I mean, so beautifully said. I mean, everything that you have just described is so visual. I mean, and I just feel like all of my senses, the smell and taste and sight are all just captured in what you have just described, and I can feel myself in the woods around the brewery. And I'm glad that you brought up the mushroom, the chanterelles, because it was another one that I was going to ask about. From a practical standpoint, how does one integrate something like leaves or mushrooms into a beer?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something that we had to experiment with, and we still are to a certain degree for a long time, with trying to understand what was the best way of integrating these flavors into beer. There's not a lot of literature out there about how one would go about doing that. We found there's a great beer book called Sacred and Herbal Healing Beers that we used as a guide for a lot of different things, which has a lot of historical recipes in historical form. So not necessarily adapted to the modern brew house, but a good place to start to give us ideas for how certain things have been used in the past. Because before hops, around the Middle Ages, beer was brewed with everything under the sun except for hops. And now it's pretty much only hops. But there's so many other flavors out there. So we kind of use that a little bit as a guide to start thinking about how we would bring these flavors in. And I think a lot of brewers today, they're used to thinking about adding flavor like hops. So, people think about when they add hops to a beer, like they get the most aroma if they're adding the hop to the end of the boil or potentially to the fermenter. And that's where you get something like dry hopping, where the hops go into the fermenter. But what we found was that most plants actually don't act at all like hops. And so in many cases, you get a lot more flavor extraction when you're putting it into the beginning of the boil, and you're actually boiling it for a full 60 minutes. We almost put virtually nothing into the fermenter for a couple of reasons, but we actually find that purely from the standpoint of flavor extraction, it's a lot better for us to put it into the boil, almost like if you were making a soup. And the other reason for that is that because we're putting a lot of wild ingredients into the beer, which have wild yeast and bacteria just living on them, it's not necessarily something that we want to add to the flavor profile of the beer.
Makes sense.
Made. Yeah, so we don't put it into the fermenter for that reason as well.
That makes total sense. Now, your work in experimenting with all of this did come together as well in this book that I referenced earlier called The Homebrewer's Almanac, which includes, I guess, brewing with farmed and foraged ingredients, which, I guess for the lay people at home that might be interested and have never heard of such a thing of, brewing with foraged ingredients, it sounds like this book could really be a guide to help folks experiment in this way.
Yeah, that's exactly why we wrote it. We wanted to, take the first few years of experience that we had using these ingredients and put it into book form, because there really wasn't any other kind of guide that we could consult that was extensive as what we wanted to put in to this book, and also use it as people could use it as kind of inspiration. I mean, I know, we're in the Midwest, and a lot of the things that grow in Southern Illinois, I mean, we're kind of in an interesting sort of mix of biomes here, where a lot of things that grow farther north of us don't, they hit us and don't grow farther south, or they come up from the south and don't grow much farther north and east and west as well. So we actually have a real rich plant diversity here. But, things that grow, wild fruits in the Pacific Northwest don't grow here, other things in the desert or in the Northeast and stuff. So we also wanted it to just be inspiration for people in different parts of the country to take these ideas and, brew with their own ingredients to find their own flavors of their parts of the country or the world.
That's fantastic. Because you're right. I mean, every single region has their own, quote, terroir.
Right.
And that's what makes it so special. You're able to capture the flavor of a place, which is exactly what you all are trying to do there at Scratch. People can actually visit the place, the brewery, right?
Yes. Yeah. We always intended for Scratch to be a place that people could come and gather and drink on site, that they would be drinking under the hickory trees that are dropping hickory nuts right now above their heads onto, a metal roof that sounds like a gun going off or something, right underneath the trees that we brewed to make the beer that they're drinking, amongst the dead leaves and carrots that's in their glass, that it would be a way of sort of connecting them to literally physically the land that the beer came from.
Mm-hmm. That's great. What would one find, besides obviously the beer, but, are there certain things that you sell there on site that you might not sell maybe at a local store in Illinois? Or I know you also, I think, supply some restaurants and bars with your beers. Is there anything specific that folks will find when they come to Scratch?
Yeah, we're a very small breweries. We've never made more than about 300 barrels a year. And the amount that goes out for distribution outside of our house is very small in the grand scheme of things. We sell most of it on site. So there's really just kind of a small amount that leaves us and goes elsewhere. So anybody who comes to visit is going to, half of the beers there are things that, you wouldn't be able to find in the limited number of places that it would be outside of Scratch. And yeah, the other thing is we have a kind of a small kitchen that has always from the beginning focused on, sort of locally sourced food in the same vein as our beer. So we make a couple pizzas a week that are made with ingredients that we grew on our farm or ingredients we foraged in the woods, like nettles. We make a nettle pesto that goes on some of our pizzas. So yeah, there's a whole sort of experience of coming out to Scratch that, from food and drink and everything is fairly unique, I think.
Well, it definitely sounds like a place that I would love to visit, and I'm sure many of our listeners would as well. One of the things we love to do is try to inspire folks to learn new things, try new things, and visit new places. So if someone wants to learn more about Scratch, where could they find you?
Yeah, check our website, scratchbeer.com, and Facebook and Instagram. We keep updated fairly regularly with events and stuff like that.
Fantastic. Well, and I myself am inspired to get in the car and start driving west from Ohio to Illinois. And am really, as I am with so many folks that I get to talk to on the show, I can't wait to see what you do next. What you all are accomplishing there at Scratch, I think is so unique. I'll be interested to see, I would love to know how it's working for folks that are trying it at home. And I really think you all are trailblazers. Can't wait to see what comes next.
Thank you so much, Capri.
Don't go away. We have to pause for a break, but we'll be back with Amy Beadle.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. There's a reason when you think of Wisconsin, you think cheese. Cheese is a huge part of Wisconsin's history and future. In Wisconsin, the state of cheese, the tradition of cheese-making excellence began 180 years ago, before Wisconsin was recognized as a state. Immigrants traveled to settle in this lush green hills of Wisconsin, bringing their cheese-making traditions with them. These storied skills, combined with the freshest milk available, created a cheese-making culture that is uniquely Wisconsin. Wisconsin's 1,200 cheesemakers, many of whom are third and fourth generation, continue to pass on old world traditions while adopting modern innovations in cheese-making craftsmanship. Find your next favorite cheese at wisconsincheese.com.
Welcome back to Eat Your Heartland Out. I'm your host, Capri Cafaro. Before the break, I was speaking with Marika Josephson, co-owner and brewer at Scratch Brewing Company, about the unique beers offered at their Ava, Illinois location. Now I'd like to welcome our next guest, Amy Beadle. Amy is the marketing manager at Visit Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau. Springfield is the Illinois state capital, best known as Lincoln's birthplace. It's also known for a little something called the horseshoe. Here's Amy.
Amy, thank you for joining Eat Your Heartland Out.
Thank you so much for having me.
One of the things that I absolutely love talking about on this show is tourism and food and tourism, and how those things go together and how they bring people out to different parts of the country, and in this case, Illinois. And I know that that's something that you're very passionate about as well as the marketing manager there in Springfield, Illinois. So for folks that aren't maybe familiar with Springfield, where it is in the land of Lincoln, and I've totally set you up there. Tell us a little bit about Springfield and its history.
Absolutely. Well, first, I couldn't agree more. My two favorite things are food and tourism, and sometimes not in that order, but usually in that order. So this is just a perfect fit. Springfield, as many probably know, is the capital city of the state of Illinois. And the state of Illinois has a motto, the middle of everything, because we're in the middle of the country. And we like to say that we are in the middle of everything, because we are directly in the center of the state of Illinois. Being the state capital, being the home of Abraham Lincoln, located along the historic Route 66, and also just all of the wonderful culinary things that we have to offer our visitors. So we do find that culinary travel, culinary experiences is something that is just, booming right now. People are looking for experience-based travel anyway, and people are very much looking for food experience-based travel. And we know that we have just the perfect combination of those things for them here in Springfield.
Absolutely. I mean, and I've gotten a chance to know a little bit about some of the things that you are doing there to promote in Springfield, but you're doing something special around something called the Horseshoe Trail. And it has nothing to do with horses or shoes or horseshoes.
Correct. It sort of does, because the history of it goes back to when it was originally made. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. But you're right. It really doesn't have to do with horses or shoes or horseshoes at this point as it relates to the animal. What it has to do with is our legendary horseshoe sandwich. It's a culinary, shall we call it a culinary belly bomb? It's something that everyone must have, but you certainly want to use that everything in moderation concept for this one. This actual culinary treasure has been in Springfield. We're approaching 100 years. 1928. The horseshoe sandwich was created at the Leland Hotel here in downtown Springfield by Chef Joe Schweska. And since 1928, it has been going strong. It has been finding new lives of its own with various different types of horseshoes, pony shoes, which is a smaller size. We even just recently added to our horseshoe trail a vegetarian and gluten-free shoe. So really something for everyone. And that sandwich is essentially a horseshoe because it starts with a large piece of Texas toast, and then it is followed by the meat of your choice. Originally, it was hamburger or ham, mainly developed with ham, then piled high with French fries, and then smothered in a beautiful, glorious cheese sauce. So as you can tell, it's very hearty, it's very filling, and something that you certainly don't want to eat every single day.
Unless you're on the Horseshoe Trail. But so take me back to the Leland Hotel.
Yes.
And how this, sort of open face sandwich belly bomb came to be, how these flavors all came together, and why and how it's become this legendary staple for the region.
Sure. Well, back in 1928, Chef Joe came home and said to his wife, I need something new for our lunch menu, something unique, something different. And she actually came up with this concept of the horseshoe, and came up with that again, deriving that from the cut of the ham, and the fries and the sauce, and then the sizzling platter that it was served on was the anvil. And so they really just came up with some kind of brilliant, unique way to sell a new lunch product, and it stuck. And like I said, today you'd be hard pressed to find any restaurant in Springfield that does not serve some variety of a shoe.
So then how does the horseshoe trail work? Then if you're gonna go on the horseshoe trail there in Springfield and vicinity, how do you know you're on the trail?
Sure. Well, the first thing you want to do is pop onto our website under our eat and drink section and find the Horseshoe Trail page. And you simply just scan the QR code, and that will put the icon on your home screen. Now, it's not an app, so it doesn't take up space on your phone, but you just put that app or put that icon on your home screen. Then you open that up. You fill out your name and email and your zip code. And then it will populate the 31 restaurants that are currently listed on the trail. You can go through them. You can see where they're located. Many of them have on what they consider their specialty or a very unique shoe, such as Lulu's Diner has a Greek Euro horseshoe that is phenomenal. And then you just decide where you want to go. When you get to the location, you check in on your GPS. And that will populate that you're there, and it will add points into your account. For every stop that you make on the trail, you'll gain more points. And then after you've collected points, there's various levels of prizes that you can earn for yourself.
I was going to say, what do you get when you're like collecting all these points?
Yeah, well, you get a full stomach, and then you get points. We have logoed coasters, drink coasters. We have tumbler cups. We have insulated wine mugs, and we have a nice journal notebook.
Cool. I love swag. I'm going to have to go to the Horseshoe Trail. How popular has this been since it's been rolled out?
It's been really popular. So we rolled it out in the middle of winter, January 11th, which was awesome because although it pulled a lot of local traffic, it helped the restaurants to see foot traffic in during a slower period of the year. But as of today, we've seen about 1,500 of the passes downloaded from our site. And then we've seen just shy of 1,000 check-ins at the various restaurants that we have. And we've seen people from 23 different states checking in.
Wow. And I had initially talked to you like a week or so ago, and those statistics that I had written down have already increased from a week or so ago. So
yes, it's a very active and moving, fun, interactive pass. So we're really excited about it. We push it out regularly. We're going to be putting a push on here in the near future to see if we want, if there's more restaurants that kind of want to come on board with it. And it's just a great marketing piece that when people are trying to decide where to go, it might not be the only reason that they come to Springfield because of all the other wonderful things we have happening here, but it certainly is an added enhancement for that culinary experience while you're on your vacation.
No question about it. And 23 states. I mean, that is more than just, folks doing a one tank trip in the region, but coming from all over the place to experience this. So that's actually quite neat. Probably some of it might have to do with the fact that you all are, on that historic Route 66. And I know that you all have and are planning to do more around your Route 66 experience. Why don't you share some of that as well?
Sure. If I might, just real quick before we jump into Route 66, I also want to mention a couple of other culinary treasures that we have here that we absolutely love. One is all of the abundance of chili that goes around this town. Today it's a little hard. It's, a little warm here for chili, but come the fall and winter, we are just blessed with tons of places. Again, it's hard pressed to find somewhere that doesn't have their own chili. But the interesting thing is in Springfield, there's this chili debate of is it chili with one L or two L's, and Dew Chili that's been around for decades as well. They are on the 2L bandwagon because a prior governor Governor Walker had proclaimed that chili should be spelled with 2 L's.
Interesting.
The original L and then a second L for the love that he had for chili. So there's a little debate there, but there's tons of wonderful chili parlors around Springfield.
That's something that I wasn't aware of. So these quote unquote chili parlors, what are, do they have a variety of different types of chilies? Similarly to how we were just talking about the horseshoes, you have, even gluten-free and vegetarian horseshoes for something that is usually meat-based. How is chili adapting to different taste profiles there in Springfield?
That's a great question. I would answer that with our famous Joe Rogers chili, or the chili parlor as it's called. Again, long-standing institution. It's actually on Route 66, which is part of our Route 66 collection of assets. And they have what they call firebrand chili. And Man vs. Food, Adam Richman came and did the challenge. They are the type of place that, if you can imagine, it's the old diner style, counter seating, table seating, and then all over the walls are these huge mats of people's names and whether or not they could tolerate the firebrand and how many bowls of it they could eat. And it's this huge challenge and this big bragging rights if you can get your name on that wall. I would not be on that wall because it is way too hot for me. But they have everything from mild, and they do this mix where you can go in and people, it's funny to stand in line because you hear people ordering. You could tell they've been there regularly because they're like, they want it exactly a certain way. They want, medium chili with, 2 drops of firebrand, oil on it. And, they'll skim that off the other chili. And so it's quite a hoot. But yeah, it's very serious here in Springfield, the chili game.
Gosh, I've learned something new. That's really, really cool.
And then, of course, chili dogs and horseshoes served with chili on top of them. And,
oh, my gosh.
It's all over the place.
Well, what about, I know that there are some parts of the Midwest that have this chili with cinnamon roll debate.
Yeah. What is that? Oh, I feel like that's in Ohio that does the cinnamon thing.
No. That's cinnamon. Well, Skyline Chili in Cincinnati has a cinnamon aspect to it.
Yeah.
But there are parts that talk about you have to have cinnamon rolls served alongside chili.
Yeah. So that's not, I won't say people don't do it, but it's not like when you go into the chili parlor, there's a big rack of cinnamon rolls sitting there.
I see.
It's not I would say it's not a thing.
I would say that I think it's more of an Indiana or Iowa and Wisconsin thing.
Oh, okay.
I understand. It's not something that we necessarily do around here either.
Well, I might have to bring that up. Maybe we could start it. I don't know, because we need to eat more, clearly.
Obviously.
And then we also have 2 other Route 66 assets that are also culinary adventures. And one is Maldener's, which is the oldest continuously operated since the late 1800s restaurant on Route 66 in town.
How
it's
cool.
a fine dining establishment right in the heart of downtown. Michael does a lot of, farm to table sourcing. He has a garden on the roof and, all that type of thing. So it's a really cool experience. And then we have our beloved Made Right sandwich shop, the very first drive-through in the nation.
Okay, this is big because Made Right is huge, but it is a very regional thing.
Yes.
Tell us what the Made Right sandwich is.
So the Made Right sandwich, which by the way turns 100 years old this year, we're having a huge party on July 27th. The Made Right sandwich is what's called a loose meat burger sandwich. So it is a meat that is with cooked specifically with their private recipe. It's served on a steamed bun. You can get it with or without a little cheese on it. And then they have wonderful French fries. And our Made Right here, Sam makes his own root beer, homemade root beer. So root beer float, whatever, however much you want to eat, we can accommodate that. And so, it's a really special, it's in an old caboose. And then obviously it's been added onto, but the original building is there. Still has the very skinny little drive-through. You got to be real careful and maneuver that well. They just got a brand new neon sign out front for their anniversary. So it's really exciting and iconic here in Springfield. We cannot wait. This party is going to be epic.
So what is the party going to entail?
The party is going to entail, we're working on getting a whole collection of classic cars for people to enjoy viewing. We've got a DJ playing, all kinds of fun music. And then we'll be having throwback pricing. So buy a Made Right and get one for a nickel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be a big day.
For sure. For sure. There's no question about that. I know that a lot of areas as well have been drawing tourists and visitors in through things like farm visits and breweries and wineries. Any of that going on around Springfield?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry we got derailed from Route 66. We'll get back to that here in just a second because it's a huge part of us as well. But yes, wineries and breweries, again, on our website, we have a tab specifically under our food and drink that lines up all of the fabulous wineries and breweries we have here. We have probably 10 or 11 right now that people can sample that do brewing and winemaking on site at their location. And so we have those all lined out for everyone to find them easily. But yes, some very great local breweries here. And then they also sell their products, in various businesses throughout the city as well.
Mm-hmm. You have a lot going on there. One other thing. So I want to go back for a minute, circle all the way back to the Horseshoe for a hot second, because as I'm thinking about Springfield, I just feel like there's so much history there. You're like, it's the 100th anniversary of this and it's the 100th anniversary of that. And, I know you said that it's going to be the 100th anniversary of Made Right.
Yes.
It's going to, this year, it's the 100th anniversary of the Horseshoe in a couple of years.
2028. Yeah.
2028.
Yes.
But the Horseshoe Sandwich and I guess its location of origin already has a historic marker, right?
Yes, just recently, as a matter of fact. So we launched this Horseshoe Trail, and the Horseshoe's always been a big deal in Springfield, but we have stories on our website. We have, the history of it. We have the recipe if you want to try to make it from home. We've had all of that kind of out there, and we talk about it, and people eat it all the time, but we never had anything specifically markered for it. And so we launched this trail, and we had tons of media attention, just dozens and dozens of media outlets. And many of them were asking questions, as do our visitors from time to time. Does the Leland Hotel still exist? Is the restaurant still there? Can we have a horseshoe there? Is the building still standing? All of those sort of things. And it got me thinking a couple months into this, we don't have anything on that building, which does still exist. It is not a hotel. It is not open to the public. It's a state building. But we didn't have anything public facing on the exterior of the building, noting that this was the historic location of where the Horseshoe was originally created. So I got to work right away with the building owner and with a local design company that does signage and beautiful work. And we made that happen in less than 3 months, that we now have a gorgeous plaque on the outside of the Illinois Commerce Commission building at 6th and Capitol Street that signifies this is the building that was the Leland Hotel, where the original Horseshoe was made and created here in Springfield. So it was a very special day. Again, we had just tons of outpouring from the media. We actually landed in the USA Today about it. So that was kind of exciting. Got on NPR and all kinds of things. So, it really shows us that although, same with Abraham Lincoln, you can have these things in your own backyard and talk about them to nausea. But you can't take those for granted. They mean so much to people.
Absolutely.
So that was a really fun byproduct of the trail, was finding out that we were lacking this marker that said this is what happened. And so you have an issue, then you find a solution, and now we have a beautiful marker people can go take their pictures with, or just stand and know that that's where the original Horseshoe was created.
Amazing. Well, I mean, again, if people didn't know that it was the home of the Horseshoe, they certainly do now.
Yes,
that's for sure. And if they are traveling Route 66, don't know what they're looking for, come across Springfield, Illinois, and find out all this really cool stuff about it. What else, if people are traveling Route 66, is there anything else that you feel like they should be looking for coming through Springfield? Because as we said at the beginning, I know that Route 66 is very much a part of the culture there.
Absolutely. And it is becoming more and more of that culture every day, bringing new things to life, bringing old things back to life, all of that. So yes, Route 66 in Springfield is, it's a couple days stay. We don't want people passing through Springfield. As you can already tell, there's multiple things to do just to eat what you need to eat. You have to stay for 2 or 3 days. But Route 66 is incredible for us. We have out at the Illinois State Fairgrounds, which is on the north end of town. It sits on Route 66, our fairgrounds does. And on the corner inside of Gate 2, we developed a Route 66 Gate 2 experience. And what that experience is it's a micro form people can walk through. There's various sheds for various areas, but it takes you from Chicago to the Chain of Rocks in southern Illinois, and you can see the entire route and everything that's along it throughout the entire state.
Wow.
And then in addition to that, the signs and the little various things that there's like cars that we made, like cage cars and things like that. But the real stunner of it is the Legends Neon Sign Park. So we have out there huge neon lit signs that you would have seen all along the road throughout the state back in the day. They've been recreated so you can come in that area and see old signage lit up in neon. So every night at dusk, it lights itself up, and it is just absolutely incredible. So we've got that. Also at the fair, just around the corner from the Gate 2, is our giant slide. So it's a giant 40-foot tall iconic yellow slide, and it now has a Route 66 emblem painted on it. So we like to say slide down 66. We've been able to open that now seasonally, May through the state fair in August, on Saturdays, which it was never open outside of the fair before. So that's a fun piece out there. We just recently worked with a team of people to renovate and reopen the Shays Gas Station Museum. It's an outdoor experience with an audio portion that people can hear from Bill Shay himself. It was one of the earliest gas stations on Route 66 back in the 40s, early 1940s, things like that. So we've been able to bring that back to life. We had a huge celebration back in May. Again, brought out tons of media and tons of attention. People are so appreciative to be able to have that history and experience that while they're in Springfield. We have the Ace Sign Company Sign Museum, which has tons of signage that was original signage that was gathered from throughout the state and on the route, just to try to preserve that for future generations to be able to see. It goes on and on. I mean, there's just so many things to see and do.
Well, it sounds that way. Well, if people want to learn more about what to visit in Springfield, your Route 66 experience, and of course, the Horseshoe Trail, where can folks find that information online or on social media?
Absolutely. They can find just a wealth of information and all of the things we're talking about, plus so much more, over on our website, which is visitspringfieldillinois.com. And then additionally, we encourage everyone to follow us on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Visit Springfield. We are posting, tons and tons of things on there. It's a great place to learn and get inspired for what we have going on in Springfield. We just recently unveiled our new mural trail, and that is that's been received really well on our social media. So we've got 8 different murals throughout and just south of the city that have gone up, many of which are on Route 66, most of which are. And so there's all the information on our Facebook page about that as well. So again, just trying to continue to add to what we have, as well as amplify what we've always had and be very proud of our history and our heritage.
Fantastic. Amy, thank you so much. I think you fired everybody up to come to Springfield, Illinois. I know I'm excited to dig into a horseshoe sandwich somewhere along the line, and maybe even chili, and definitely check out the history of all of that, as well as Route 66. Thanks so much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. And look me up when you get here. We'll go grab lunch.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Eat Your Heartland Out. This episode was produced by me, Capri Cafaro. Our audio engineers are Liam Warner and Armin Spengen. Theme music by Jason Shaw. You can learn more about the show by visiting heritageradionetwork.org/Eat Your Heartland Out. Eat Your Heartland Out is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.